Hi everybody, thank you very much for being here. Can I please ask the panel members to kindly come on board? Can everybody hear me? Is the mic working?
Yes.
It is? Shall I shout a bit louder? Okay, I will. So, Bangladesh have been in Britain since the 1800s and have progressed much in society. We're here at the moment to talk about the past and going forward into the future. Bangladeshis have achieved much, as illustrated by the esteemed panel members here today. The way that this is going to work is that I'm going to introduce you to the panel members, tell you a little bit about them, and then I'll ask you some questions about that related to their background, and I'll do that with each of the panel members. After that, I'll open it out to question and answer. So if you can, if you don't mind, refraining from asking any questions, if you have any burning questions when they're speaking, and leave it till later on when we have the question and answer session. So what was that, Mr. Choudhury?
Can you introduce yourself?
I will. I've got it here. My name is Dr. Sultana Choudhry. It's a great honour to be asked to chair this panel today. And for the record, my own background is that I'm an academic with an abnormal psychology and psychiatry background. I've also worked in government, and right now I've just finished, I'm about to finish a book, a fiction book called The Londoning. That's enough about me. I'll now introduce you to, I'm going to go by the way that it's been presented on this leaflet here. So I'll introduce you to Abdal, who is an experienced community activist. Most of you, I think probably everyone here knows him very well.
Who is it?
He's also had numerous media roles, including his own radio show. Am I right in saying that?
Your guest next week.
Okay, I'll do my best to suck up, be nice. He founded the BBPI, British Bangladeshi Power and Inspiration, which is a list of 100 leading Bangladeshi figures in Britain. And for anyone who's wondering, no, he's not open to bribery. It has to be earned. And he's produced this amazing booklet here. He's also got a website which you can look up. He's also the co-founder and director of Labour Faith Network, which is a faith-inspired political platform that shapes the future of the Labour Party. And I think I'm going to pass you on to him to tell you a bit more about him, and then I'll ask him some questions. So, Abdal, please. Over to you.
Good evening. Well, it is evening. What a sunny day, and I'm so pleased that you're in this room. Thank you very much for that, and I'm really honoured to be. In fact, this is like a reunion for some friends I haven't seen for a while, and some friends who've been here have gone. I think those of you who've been all day have heard the journey of the Bangladesh community. Like many of you in this room, my late father, late 60s, Brick Lane, Brinsley Street. In fact, I can trace my June 23rd, 1984, number 4 Brick Lane. Arrived at 7 in the afternoon, 7 in the evening. That's the story of me, in a sense. I've been very fortunate. I'm sitting with friends, in fact, people I know on this top table and friends here, who've done well in all the difficulties of the curry trade, the rag trade, and living through the post sort of BNP explosion, Brick Lane. And we've done well. Whether you want to credit the old government or the new government, the education that we've had, opportunity has been given to us. And sort of, as we celebrate the first Asian, Pakistani origin, Muslim if you want to call him that, Mayor of London, this goes back I was very fortunate 16 years ago to be a part of the GLA family, the Greater London Authority. I became the first British Muslim Bangladeshi under the age of 10. I was 30 to be a member of the London Police Authority, which is in a sense a responsible position for the governing of the London Police. Post McPherson's report looking to change the, I guess, the interaction of police in London, governing them. And through that time, I was very fortunate. I'm looking at TC here. We used to sort of bump into government. You know, it was a New Labour thing. It was called Britannia. We used to go to sort of social networks, events, and so forth. And you bump into a fellow Bangladeshi from all over the country at a government event. So post Midland riots, right? So we were the expert because we were flourishing in London, in Tower Hamlet, and we weren't rioting because we were happy with us supplementary schools, and we had after-school clubs, and so government was interested. And some of us who spoke English and so they were interested in talking to us. And as I traveled the country, I met some amazing people. And every now and then I meet a fellow Asian, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're Bangladeshi." Now bear that word, "Oh, Bangladeshi." It became a bit of an annoyance to me as we through later the years. I guess I was very fortunate, and it's not a publicized. But I also met my wife through work, and who, some of you in this room will know is an amazing lady, not because I'm married to her, but she is. And she does some amazing work. And so the life changed after 9/11. As the only headscarf wearing BBC reporter, life changed for her. And I was in the police authority, and Muslims were the people we used to bash, and so now we're doing all the Muslim stuff. So I was meeting more amazing people, more Muslim role models, and I thought, what do we do to inspire the next generation of British Bangladeshis? We were lucky, we had the education, but what can we do to really install the belief that you can achieve? We had the issues of BNP and National Front, and we did okay. But now it's this additional dilemma of Muslim and identity bashing. How can we get positive role models for British Bangladeshi? Because when you take everything away, they still ask you where your family's from, Bangladesh. So that's our common identity. We are British Bangladeshi. So in 2012, with the Olympic in London, it was all kind of cool, which, by the way, my wife played a role to bring to London. We thought we want to celebrate. We want to celebrate being cool Bangladeshis in Britain. So we thought we're going to do a list to promote our community. Now, we have lots of award ceremonies. Those of you who've been to Curry Awards or some community awards, there's a sort of a token gesture that you pay £50, you get the best chef of the year, or you give £100, you get the best community champion award, whatever. We just want to sort of get away from that. It's something that will actually inspire a 15-year-old, 10-year-old, even an 8-year-old to look at a list and say, well, if they can do it, I want to be able to do it. And also to promote real talent. So we set about setting up this thing called BB Power, right? To sort of really recognize individuals in our community who aren't exactly seeking limelight, but their good work should be recognized, not just for the British Bangladeshi community, but more importantly for the wider community. Because the stereotype, the Daily Mail and the Evening Standard, the basket case of East London, Tower Hamlet, the housing crisis, or on the benefit, or the fact that £4 billion we pump into the economy through the curry. But we're more than that. So this list we put together secretly, because we didn't want the older uncle, saying, "Do you know who I am?" because he put me on the list. So we did it very quietly and secretly. So I built it as though it was a celebration of 40 years of British Bangladeshi. We launched it at the House of Parliament with a wonderful first British Bangladeshi MP there and various others, and it really took off. And the fact that I was invited to Bangladesh to celebrate, because the Bangladeshi foreign minister thought that this was a great event. I can see Farhan Bhai is in the room, who was there with me to host an event in Sylhet, because predominantly a lot of the people on the list are of Sylheti origin. So it was a very big thing in Bangladesh. All the headline, this is your fellow countrymen in Britain doing great things. So this kind of grew. We're now on our 5th year. We just launched, so we had 3 years in Parliament. We then went up to Canary Wharf to launch it there. Last year was a City Hall. We're now on our 5th year. And it's becoming tougher in the sense that it's competition in the sense that we are finding more and more amazing people. It's only 100. We started with 10 categories. Now we have 20, like roughly 5 people per categories. But we are so astonished that every day every week, people are emailing us saying, I work with someone I just found out is British Bangladeshi of origin. You should look at them. So we do discreetly look at people. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm sort of stalking you because I am, kind of looking at your work and because you've been recommended. Now, move forward for 5 years, is what do we do to sustain this? So we've just launched a BBPI Foundation. Now, we know our community, the British Bangladeshi, is at disadvantage economically and so forth. Some of you in this room have the opportunity to open the doors of the next generation, but there isn't a collective effort. There's a lot of wonderful things said earlier about parents and grandparents, being the role model. But what we now need is those friends who are working in the city or at various commercial banks or at universities and so forth to act as a guardian and to act as a role model. In the 80s when we grew up, there wasn't really a role model. It was, as somebody said earlier, I was frightened sometimes to take my dad to my parents' evening because what if he misunderstood that I was getting naughty and then, exactly. But now, what we want to do is to sort of use our brother's generation to open doors for the next generation. So, a stone's throw here, the City Mile, we've got amazing people doing amazing jobs. So our generations who are now middle, upper level management, what I'm now asking them to do is to say, it's a boys' network. If there's internship in the summer, tell me. I will send you some of the best kids because there are bright kids. I'm asking universities, we had the free education. Currently, we don't have that opportunity. So we are now sort of saying to parents, if you are going to fork out £30,000+, have the choice. So, don't settle for no disrespect to the old polytechnics. Go to a Russell group because at the end of the day, you're competing in a global market. So we're promoting that. We're also getting, internship and networking in a more sophisticated way because you have to know, it's not just getting the degree, you have to know the people. So that's the idea. It's about celebrating the achievement of the British Bangladeshi, also now opening doors for the next generation so that we don't just see the one MP, we see 10 MP. Yes, it's great to see Sadiq there, but hey, we would like to see a British Bangladeshi be the Prime Minister in 20 years' time. Be ambitious, be bold, and I think some of the people in this room, some of the people on our list for the last 5 years have that opportunity to open up. So in a nutshell, 45 years of British Bangladeshi community, we've done well, we need to celebrate their achievement, but also open the doors for the next generation, so create a legacy. So in some respect, I hope in many years to come, the BBPI Foundation will act as a legacy to empower the next generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was really very interesting. And you can ask questions later on. I've also got some questions, particularly relating to the Labour Party and their recent success. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Halima Khanom, who's basically, she's going to be talking about heritage and just some of the amazing things that she's been doing with respect to young people in film. At the moment, she's based in the National and International Learning and Engagement Department. She leads and coordinates the Make Film, Make History project, which explores what it means to be young in Europe today. The final films will be available and will be screened across Europe in July this year, and in a programme curated by young people. She also supported projects that worked with the youth and community groups, particularly in East London. And I'm going to, actually, I should mention something else before I move on and pass her over to you. She does something really interesting, which is related to Islamic attire, and basically what she did is she worked for something called the Islamic Fashion Project, which worked to update the Museum of London's fashion collections by collecting items reflecting London Muslim dress. Perhaps you can tell us a bit more about that, but and first of all, if you could just start off with just giving us your background, and that would be great.
Thank you. Oh, is it working? Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm honoured to be sitting at such an esteemed panel, and I've been coming to these events for years, so it's really exciting to be invited to speak. So my background is history. I'm a historian, and I was trained as such. I went to Goldsmiths University. I'm still very early sort of career, early to mid-career. So you mentioned that I currently work at the Imperial War Museum. I work with young people across Europe on that specific project at the moment, working with films and getting young people to tell their stories. I think European identity question is very interesting at the moment. Whether we leave or stay in Europe is something that's definitely being discussed by young people and will affect how we move across borders and how citizenship is imagined now and for years to come. So, as you mentioned, my specialism is working with young people and hard-to-reach people to connect with their heritage so that it gives them a stronger sense of identity, whether they are connecting with their local, national, or international heritage. To relate to the title of the discussion, I think the past is key to knowing where you are from, how you fit into British historical narrative, and it gives you a strong sense of, I guess, cultural and social capital. These skills, I guess, traditionally weren't seen as that vital, but are slowly becoming recognised as quite key to being a successful part of the workforce. So whereas these skills, I think, comes quite naturally to those who are from middle-class white backgrounds, I think it's harder for young British Bangladeshis, for example, to be confident in their history and where they are here. But I think being sat where we are, being in the event that we are, we should give credit to groups like Brick Lane Circle, for example, who do incredible work. And I only came across this fact about 2-3 years ago. So as to why some of these problems occur and why it is that this sort of sense of heritage isn't being transferred onto second and third generation Bangladeshis, I guess I've been exploring it in my career, in my own entry into the heritage sector and from my own background as a historian. So partly this is because of language barriers emerging between parents, grandparents and third generation Bangladeshis. But what I'm interested in discussing today, I think, is a lack of representation of people from migrant backgrounds in museum, galleries, creative industries, particularly in the institution I'm working in, the Imperial War Museums. For example, there's a whole centenary celebration around 100 years since the First World War. Part of the war effort was, 1 million Indian soldiers, and a huge part of those were Bangladeshis. How many of us know about that, and how many young people are connecting to that story, and how peripheral is that story? So that's a lot of what my work focuses on. Whether I'm able to do it at work freely or whether I do it outside of work, I think it's important to stay within the sector and attach myself to institutions like the Imperial War Museum so that I'm able to sort of discuss it and impact it internally and externally by interacting with Brick Lane Circle, for example. So my own story about connecting to my British Bangladeshi background is slightly different to what I've just discussed. My first role straight out of university, I studied at Goldsmiths University. I pursued a role in the heritage sector. I started at the Royal Geographical Society. This is effectively started as a gentleman's dining club in the 1800s. They sat around discussing their exploits and their pursuits, travelling to the Far East and India and so on. And then they brought back little artifacts and they patted themselves on the back. Not much has changed at 2012, so you can imagine I stuck out quite a bit there. But I was part of this diversity scheme called Strengthening Our Common Life. I was there for a year and I tried to make my mark in the best way I could. So one day I was in the reading room. Now this room holds artifacts, maps, collections from all over the world, every corner you could possibly imagine. And I came across a collection, the Survey of Bengal collection from 1764. The survey, for those of you who don't know, was a mapping survey led by someone called James Rennell, who later became known as the father of Indian geography, a British gentleman. So I think this was my eureka moment. I started going through the collection myself and worked out what the relationship between Bengal and the UK is, and why it is, as a second generation Bangladeshi, why I am here effectively, connecting to my own father's story and how he came in the 70s and worked in factories right on Brick Lane and along the Cambridge Heath Road, and my mother coming later on. And I developed projects around this and research around this, particularly around the division of Bengal in 1906, which I found fascinating. Prior to this, I guess I wasn't as interested in that story before. I didn't see it as, well, not that it wasn't relevant, I didn't see it as accessible. So this happened to me, and I was incredibly grateful for this opportunity, and I almost stumbled upon it, as I've just described. So I guess now, a few years on, I worked in the Museum of London in the project that you mentioned, and similarly to what you were mentioning, it's a Muslim thing now. So at the Museum of London, there is a huge collection of fashion relating to Londoners from the 1500s through till today. And they had one outfit reflecting what it means to be British Muslim in London, which was a floor-length abaya with a niqab, and it was illustrated basically in a very difficult way. So I worked with young Muslims in London, several of which were British Bangladeshi second generation, and we worked on collecting 6 outfits which updated the collection to reflect what it means to be young and Muslim in London today. And I wanted to do older and older and older, but I was given a limit. So it's just the beginning of the work. And what we found was that young Muslims, Bangladeshis included, are incredibly fashionable and confident, and they're buying things, they're making businesses out of it, they're selling things, and they're not afraid of doing that. So I think that's what I was really excited to find out, and that collection went on to display as well, which was an incredible achievement. So these institutions, I guess I'm going through, haven't touched the British Bangladeshi community until I effectively arrived there and made them aware that this is something that you should be working on. These collections are relevant to these people. So I'm more interested, I guess, in the later discussion with the panel and what you have to say. So I'm going to wrap it up very soon. But I just want to say that I think it's very critical to British Bangladeshis born in the UK to instill in the sense of belonging that ensures that connection with Bangladesh stays alive within the diasporic Bangladeshi communities for generations to come. I already see it deteriorating, and it worries me. I think this could be done by, well, talking to people that know the story, our parents, our grandparents, but more importantly, from a heritage professional's perspective, capturing that. Whether you're doing sort of the oral history interviews, which I know Booker Circle is very involved in, and your research is involved in capturing the oral histories, but using new and newer sort of mediums to do that. So I do it through film. I see film as a really interesting way to engage young people, blogging, social media, and so on. But it doesn't just go as far as capturing these stories. I think I try and encourage anyone I know to pursue careers in the creative sector, such as the heritage sector, so that someone else, I can walk down one of these institutions and maybe come across another Bangladeshi girl in a hijab one day and say, okay, wow, you're here, because that hasn't happened yet. But I think storytelling is the key way to sort of look back to the past, reflect on the future, and get a real sense of where we're going. And we need more and more people to be entering these sectors to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really quite fascinating, and it's just really nice that someone who's a Bangladeshi and wearing hijab is in the creative sector. And I think I agree with that. That's a sector that needs Bangladeshis, and let's hope we see more of that in the future. I'm now going to pass you over to Tharik Hussain, who is a freelance journalist, travel writer, broadcaster, photographer. I'm sorry, I've had to write this all down because there's so many things that these people have done. It's so impressive. He's also a blogger, specialises in the Islamic stories of Europe and Muslim halal travel. I'm sure he can expand on the halal concept. He's writing and photography regularly appear in magazines and websites across the globe. He's one of the main contributors to the Thomson Reuters Islamic travel portal of Salam Gateway, and he's also been a guest on BBC Radio, British Muslim TV and the Islamic channels. He's also just finished helping Lonely Planet Guide and doing a guide for the Hajj. He was born in Bangladesh. He grew up in the East End, not far from here, and also lived in Jeddah. I'd love to hear a bit more about that. He's currently working on his debut book describing his travels across Europe in search of the continent's forgotten Muslim heritage. So, Tharik Bhai, over to you.
Thank you.
Well, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is actually overlapping with Halima, who I know very well because we often work on projects together. But rather than repeat what Halima's already said. I suppose I'll focus on the area that I'm working on. And the narrative is actually really quite similar. As Abdal said earlier, you know, we all began with trying to find out who we are as Bangladeshis, and I did a similar thing as part of my undergrad. You know, I went and explored my father's narrative, I went and explored the narrative of the Bangladeshi Diaspora, and it helped me feel much more connected to who I was. But again, it was almost accidental, you know, kind of stumbling across it as part of my undergrad studies when I was wandering around not really sure who the hell I was or what the hell I was doing. Fast forward to, you know, post 9/11, and it all goes pear-shaped, as we know. And I end up doing some work with within that broad, and we all hate the label, you know, PVE, prevent, whatever you want to call it. And I'm working down in South London with a lot of young Muslims who clearly have no idea what it means to be Muslim and British stroke European. And one of the things that I came across during that time was the sense of alienation to being in the West, broadly speaking. But at the same time, what I was doing as well is I was going on my own personal journey, which kind of overlapped. And that journey took me to Jeddah, as we've heard. And one of the reasons that I ended up in Jeddah was because at that point, I'd become convinced that I didn't belong here. You know, I was thinking that as a Muslim, for whatever reason, you know, that I wasn't sure that I belonged here as well. And interestingly enough, the journey that took me to Jeddah, the first time around on a kind of recce, as we say in the media industry, I didn't have much money, so I had to buy a ticket that ended up giving me a long a stop off in Cyprus. And it's weird how these things happen. And I found myself in Larnaca for 7 hours with my wife, my children, and my sister-in-law who was travelling with us as well. And it just so happened, you know, I kind of always had an interest in history, heritage, etc. And I came across this tiny little mosque just outside Larnaca, approximately half-hour drive by cab. I thought, well, you know, what the hell am I going to do here? I might as well go and have a look. And not only that, it was described very, very beautifully in this brochure or website or whatever it was I came across, you know, sitting on salt lakes and what have you. I'd never even seen a salt lake at this point. I thought, yeah, this is going to be great. I went over there, thought, wow, this is really interesting. There was a tomb inside the mosque. I had no idea what I was looking at. The old semi-blind guy who was taking me around had no idea what he was telling me either, because I was going to speak the same language. And essentially, I thought, well, nice day out, off we go. You know, I'm off to Jeddah to carve out a new life as a kind of Muslim living in my land, so to speak. It was only years later I realised the significance of the place when I came back from Jeddah extremely disillusioned and even more confused. And it turns out that the mosque was built on the site of where a Sahabi is buried. Now, to those of you that don't know, it's a female companion of the Prophet. This is Cyprus. This is Europe. What on earth is a Sahabi doing here? I had absolutely no idea. Nobody ever told me that Muslims had turned up here so early. I'd heard kind of rumours about Spain, where we're talking, you know, 10, 15 years ago here. Right? I'd heard rumours about Spain and what have you, but I didn't think for 1 minute that there was any kind of Muslim heritage in Europe that was worth knowing about. And of course, that's when it all kind of got very, very interesting. And so for the last 10, 15 years, I've wandered all across Europe, literally every single country, and this summer I'm going to tick the last 6 off. And in every single country, I have been absolutely blown away by the extent of not just Islamic heritage, but also the number of indigenous Muslim communities that I've come across. And we're here talking about connectedness and heritage and roots and narrative. And I want to tell you the story about the one that I most recently came across, which was in the Baltic, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. When I was out there, I got extremely excited by this rumour that there was a Muslim community there that had been living there for 600 years, completely isolated from the rest of the Muslim world and so on. I went there, I met up with the Grand Mufti of Lithuania, I didn't even know there was one, okay, and it turns out that they have been there for 600 years. And in 600 years, they still hadn't forgotten their kind of original migrant story, shall we say. And they, as a community, they still knew the story well, they still knew where they came from, but yet they were able to balance that fantastically well with the idea of being Lithuanian. These are Crimean Tatars. So those of you that don't know what they might look like, they're kind of connected to the whole Mongol race. And the story is fascinating, which I'm not going to bore you with right now, but it was just a classic example of just how little we as Muslims living in the West, know about our own heritage? 1400 years. 1400 years, almost 1400 years of history, and yet the popular line is Europe is a Judeo-Christian heritage. And that's something that I'm trying to, and whatever else that you mentioned earlier. And the main reason I'm doing it in this way is because whilst I also have a fascination in academia, and I'm an aspiring academic who's hoping to go and do my own PhD in this field, I believe it's far more important to popularise this stuff. It's our young people that feel alienated. It's our young people that don't feel like they belong. And the main reason is because the way in which they engage with the media, it's not to the academic level that some of us might. And so it's in popular culture, it's in the popular media, it's films, it's YouTube videos, it's blogs, you know, and all these other things that they've developed that I have no idea about. You know, 9 times out of 10 I'm turning to my younger daughters to explain it to me, and I'm a media teacher by profession. I kid you not, you know, I'm a media teacher by profession. 10 years, almost 10 years I've been teaching as a media teacher, and still I have to turn to my daughters to help me understand what is this snapback or Snapchat or whatever it is. And of course it's quite humiliating and embarrassing, but the reality is the media is that, you know, it's constantly moving, it's constantly in flux, it's dynamic, and the reality is nobody can keep in touch with it. You know, so my whole journey, if you like, is to popularise this narrative. It's to completely try and reorientate this notion that Muslims are alien to this part of the world. You know, the Muslim that completely changed the landscape of Europe, ironically, was a Syrian refugee. If you look into the history of the Islamic narrative that came into Europe, it was a member of the Umayyad dynasty who fled a massacre in Damascus on his own. So he was fleeing a war, and he arrived into the south of Spain and into Cordoba, and then he developed this amazing, phenomenal culture that was effectively, and most academics know this, the bedrock of the European Renaissance. So everything that European Muslims love about Europe, free speech, democracy, free market, all of this, we had a part to play in it, but they don't know that bit. So when they get confused, and when people like myself and most of the members here at some point or another have been dragged into a media office and asked to comment on why girls from Bethnal Green are running off to wherever, and we have to talk about alienation, we have to talk about narratives of belonging, we can't even talk about this stuff because nobody knows it. I remember being on the World Service and asked to comment about the girls from Bethnal Green. And I happened to mention that I was very well acquainted with the Bulgarian Muslim community, and they turned around and asked me, "Are there really are there really Muslims in Bulgaria?" I was like, "Yes, they are. They've been there for 600 years." So this is what, for me, is, you know, it's the long game, but it's also connected to everything else we're talking about here. You know, we need to find a way to help Bangladeshis, who are predominantly Muslim in this part of the world, of course, to feel like they belong here. You know, whilst also, like those Baltic Tatars, not forgetting their roots as well. You know, not forgetting their origins and not forgetting where they come from. And just before I finish, I just want to talk about, because obviously I'm supposed to be talking from the media perspective, I just want to talk about one person in the media right now who's really inspiring me. You know, I've got 2 young girls, so I'm always looking for positive female role models. And I think Tharik Hussain is amazing. Okay, and the reason what I'm really, really excited about right now is she's just been given a commission to do the Chronicles of Nadia. So some of you might know about this, and I love this idea because first of all, it's a hijabi Bangladeshi Muslim girl who's from the same villages that I grew up in, okay, and she's got the same surname as well, which is always great, right? And she's off to Bangladesh to go and sit in the villages where her grandparents, her mother, and everybody else grew up in, and she's going to cook those, you know, those authentic fish curries that Abdal loves so much. But also the journey, of course, it's going to be a popular representation of our heritage. Okay, it's going to capture the imagination of our young people because she's really popular with them as well. But just the fact that she's been given this opportunity and she's embracing it is something that I feel was a really, really positive example of how Bangladeshis in this country should be engaging with the media. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tharik. Well, certainly I didn't know anything about Monica, and Europe and how so many communities in Europe are Muslims. And I would like to ask you which village in Bangladesh you're from. I don't know if that's confidential. Would you like to tell us?
Yeah, I don't think there's enough Bengalis in here for me to get any prejudice remarks. So I'm from the district of Ullah.
Oh my God. Oh.
There you go.
Get off.
That's actually very close to me. Well, I'm from the district of Sakigund, which is very close to Skudapgund, but
I don't think we should do too much of our sectarianism to those
no, I don't think we should, because we might get out to talking about his wife soon, so we don't want Right. Next, I'd like to move on to Dr. Halima Begum. Thank you both of you for sitting so patiently on this side. She has a PhD in Human Geography. She's worked for the Department of Education and Development, DFID. She's also worked at the Centre for Civic Society, a think tank at the London School of Economics, and at ActionAid in London. In 2012, Halima joined the British Council. She's responsible for shaping British Council strategies for education in 14 countries in East Asia. And if you could kindly, Halima, please tell us a bit more about your work.
Sure. Is that better? I can't look at all of you because I'm at an angle. Thank you. I was going to start by saying I feel like an imposter, but I won't, because I've come back to the UK after 10 years and I keep hearing this word imposter, and I have a big problem with it. Because I do feel as though we need to emphasize this message around belonging. And I grew up in Brick Lane, I'm born in Bangladesh. I always belonged. There was no doubt about where I came from, and it was this country. And I also had roots in Bangladesh. There was no doubt that I had an Islamic heritage. There's no doubt whatsoever. So I do find it a little bit alarming that I hear more alienation and lots more isolation and a sense of disempowerment that has taken place in the last 15 years, which I think has a lot to do with current government policies rather than some of the essentialist discourses that I continuously hear and read about. I mean, with a culture shock at the moment. So imagine going from Bethnal Green, seeing the world. I went to Nepal for 2 years and I worked with the British government to support Nepal's education system. Nepal is the country of Everest, but most people don't know that. It's incredibly poor. 2 years later, I went to China to work in Beijing. This is when China was transforming, and it is what it is now, a double-digit economy. A massive success in terms of East Asia's miracle that we hear about. That was amazing. And then after that I went to Pakistan to work for the British government. And again, that was that period when I think they found Osama bin Laden. So I was there at that moment when actually that happened. And just being at the kind of forefront of the British government's work on the ground while we're interacting with the Pakistani authorities in a very insecure environment. Pretty mind-blowing actually from lots of different perspectives, politically, economically, being a Bangladeshi Briton working in Pakistan, for those of you who are aware of Pakistani sensibilities. So it's really interesting. And then after that I thought, okay, what do I do now? Oh, I haven't been to Bangladesh, the country that I was born in, and what would that experience be like? So I spent a year working in Bangladesh for the British government, the Foreign Office, and interacting with organisations like BRAC that we hear about. They're wonderful organisations. They are doing amazing work in Bangladesh, actually. And that was fascinating. And then finally, going to Indonesia, which is the world's largest Muslim majority country. It's the fourth largest country in the world, and witnessing how the UK and the American governments work in that country. Very confident country, I should add, a confident Muslim country that hasn't been as influenced by Wahhabi Saudi Islam in its pure form, and is still located in Southeast Asia where the economic still works. So it's been very interesting. So instead of going through my experience, I just wanted to tell you a few stories and comments that have been made to me while I have been in these various locations, because I think they tell you a lot about the experiences of the British Bangladeshi, both to you as a professional and how you manage yourself. So when I first went to work with DFID Bangladesh, I met lots of Bengali colleagues in the British Bangladesh DFID office, incredibly skilled colleagues, highly qualified, connected to, I suppose, the middle and the ruling classes of Bangladesh, and who, by the way, are not Sylheti. And I remember going there and being a representative of the British government, and there's always a little bit of a tension between the international staff and the local staff, and I was prepared for that. But what I wasn't prepared for was a very senior colleague sort of having a conversation about language. Like, this is why I'm mentioning this, because we talked about language and how we each feel about language when we are not bilingual. His comment to me was, it's such a shame you're very accomplished, but you don't speak your mother tongue. Why not? So this is, I guess, he speaks Bangla, and I tend not to use Shuddha Bangla because I don't agree that there is one or another way to speak Bengali. So he speaks Bangla. And it was a little bit insulting, but how do you manage yourself? And you do have a professional persona to maintain. So I kind of thought, okay, I'm beyond this. I'm going to tackle this in a way that will teach him a lesson. But I did say, well, I do speak my mother tongue, I just don't speak yours. And his second comment to me was that, I'm telling this story because you will know that British Bangladeshis tend to come from Greater Sylhet, the rest of Bangladesh comes from other parts of the world, and there is a sort of sentiment that British Bangladeshis are all poor, disadvantaged, they don't know anything, etc., etc. Anyway, the second comment was, British Bangladeshis they don't really educate themselves, do they? They just tend to work in the restaurant sector. I thought, oh God, what do I do now? Has he really said that? And in Bangladesh, in Asian culture, it's all about saving face. You don't actually say what you want to say. And I'm very British in my ways by now, so I am quite blunt, but I thought, no, I could flex this, I could do this. So I did say, well, I don't know how many British Bangladeshis you know, but I'm the least accomplished and the least achieved. Who do you know? I think they kind of rate PhDs in Bangladesh, so anyway, that was the end of that. And I think it's about managing your own personality and your messages in a way that tells a very positive story. And that's what I'm finding. Another story in Islamabad. So I was in an elevator with the CEO of Geo Media. And Geo Media is the largest Pakistani media house in Pakistan. And they're really daring, actually. They go out there and they have a go at the fundamentalists. They're just so good. And you want to fund them. That's what you want to do, because that's a media house that you want to see in Pakistan flourish. So I was part of the UK team. I suppose they were looking for some funding from us. We're in the elevator, and the pitch was something like, okay, we really need this money, but in a very sophisticated form. Because, Pakistan used to be very prosperous, and now, guess what? Now, we're even below Bangladesh. Would you believe that? We can't have that. And again, in an elevator, it's a highly pressurized situation. I'm thinking, oh my God, did he really say that? And I replied, it's really important that Pakistan has a media industry and that we should support that. Anyway, 2 hours later, when we sat at the meeting, somebody said, oh, Halima's from Bangladesh. And the look on that face was priceless. And that's when I realized that, that sense of insecurity and not belonging all the time, to be underestimated is quite a powerful tool to have. And it's very important to remember that, and it actually empowers you. I could tell you lots of stories about this, but I did want to kind of open up this discussion around, thinking of ourselves as not just in Britain as we are, but to think of us in the world. And today, I thought a lot of the discussion was about British Bangladeshis, not even in the UK, but a lot of us in a certain part of London. And actually, as a diverse community, we have a set of experiences that go well beyond some of our roots, and we should confidently reflect that. And I hope that we do. My story was that I grew up in Brick Lane, and I wanted to see the world. And why wouldn't I see the world? Apparently, my ancestors crossed 7 seas to reach here. So, that was my heritage, and that's the heritage that I took out. So it's been an amazing journey, and I'm still out there. And when I hear discussions about how British Bangladeshis manage language, how we manage our Hajj pilgrimages, we do that in Pakistan too. We do that in Indonesia, and it's not all about a minority situation. We just happen to be a minority in Britain. We are actually a much larger majority than we ever give ourselves credit for, and I think having that confidence is what's needed at the moment when you feel constantly barraged with negative images. And I think that's our responsibility. I mean, I'm a little bit older than some of you here, most of you probably, and I certainly come back after 10 years and feel as though, okay, we need to reconnect to what's special about it. And I hope that, you know, the time I now spend in the UK is about doing this, and particularly with young women, and you know, finding a bit of a niche there to contribute in some way. That's all I'll say.
Thank you so much. It's just admirable, some of the things that you're doing, Halima, and all over the world. And I wanted to just touch on what you said about a sense of identity. I recently went to Bangladesh, and after a long time, I was born in Bangladesh, and what struck me was that for the first time I was in a country where everyone was brown, and it was amazing. And just a sense of peace and comfort that you feel from that. I think it's just amazing, and it's sad that at the moment in this climate of negativity that our children and some of us don't experience that. I'm now going to pass you on to our final but also very impressive colleague, Sanawar Choudhury. He's a course leader for the MSc in Investment and Finance at the University of Bedfordshire. His research interests include cash flow reporting, Islamic finance and Sharia compliant banking, the regulatory framework in comparative accounting. I'm afraid a lot of this is going way above my head, and the mechanism for effective communication. He's also a multi-millionaire businessman. He's worked extensively with blue chip companies in the UK, Europe, USA, and the Far East. The most important thing he does at the moment, he wanted me to let you know, is that he tries to inspire enterprise within, what would you say, within the Bangladeshi communities. He's also worked in Bangladesh for a number of years, and there's a really good YouTube interview of him if anyone's interested in seeing that. And Sanawar, I'd like to pass it on to you.
Assalamu alaikum. Really, we've heard such powerful stories from such an eminent panel here. I think I should start off by telling an anecdote of my own. I went to, sorry? Can you hear me?
That's better.
Well, I'm probably the oldest in this panel. Because I went to
I just look old.
I went to university in the late 80s, and I don't remember seeing other Bangladeshis at university. And when I joined Price Waterhouse, it was a very white institution, a very blue-blooded institution, Oxbridge dominated. And I remember being in a group of 12 that joined here in London and then transferred over to St Albans. And yearly they used to have these dinners where first dinner that I'd gone to, which was really black tie. I'd been to black tie dinners before, but this was a truly black tie affair where cigars were being spoken on the tables, smoked on the tables, and it was a really a nostalgic old boys club. And whilst there, I was a junior, had just joined Price Waterhouse about 3-4 months in. And I overheard the next table, there was this tax partner, a shortish, plumpish guy in his 50s, talking very loudly, smoking a cigar, talking very loudly about how the British had civilized the Africans. And that sort of touched me. I thought, this is quite interesting, how loud he was and how well he was being heard by all of the others. And I was probably the only brown face there. There were some black faces, but I was the only brown face within a hall of about 1,200 people. And these were all, worldwide partners, senior managers, and sort of trainees, and I was one of the trainees at that hotel. And slowly as the evening went on, I managed to find myself sitting next to him. And I said to him, what's interesting about this story that you're telling about how the British had civilized the Africans. Who actually civilized the British? And he was taken aback. And as he was taken aback, I thought, well, let me who do you think civilized the British? And at that time, I was a bit jittery, I was a bit nervous because this was a senior tax partner, and I was there and my partners were sitting on the next table. And then he said, what do you mean? I said, well, obviously, there was a time when the Brits lived in caves and rule of law didn't exist. And who actually gave you the current road system and the legal framework that you operate in? Oh, he goes, the Romans. And at that time, I started to become a little bit more confident, just sort of talking to him. And I could see that a few other people were gathering around because I was. My voice became a little louder, and I said, well, this is interesting, isn't it? How the Romans civilized the British by giving the rule of law, the road system, and various other things. Who actually civilized the Romans? And he goes, and by that time I was becoming more and more confident, and I was quite a copy. So I started to speak my own, and started to speak a bit loudly, and by then about 4 or 5 people had gathered. And I said, the Romans were civilized by the Greeks. And who do you think civilized the Greeks? And by then, about 15 to 20 people had gathered. And I was becoming louder. And it was a smoke-filled room. It was a big hotel, but it was full of smoke because everybody was smoking cigars and cigarettes and stuff, because this was the only thing they did in those days. And I said, the Romans were civilized by the Greeks. And who do you think civilized the Greeks? 7,000 years before. And by then I had quite an audience. I said, it was the Egyptians. So Bangladeshi. So I'm a British Bangladeshi. I have 4 children, all of them largely grown up. My youngest is 17. My oldest, who is a daughter, 23, getting married this July. So I've really enjoyed my time. I've drafted. My father came here in 1956. He was a headmaster in Bangladesh, came here, did a lot of labor-intensive work, opened a restaurant in 1972. I shut it down in 1986, 87, and have never looked at the restaurant trade since, although I have over 1,000 restaurant clients in one of my businesses that I have. So I've done an awful lot. And one of the things that's really important, and I want to quote Obama here, is that it's not important where we come from, but where we intend to go. And I think by the panelists here, you see where we have gone already. I think Claire talked about 90,000 people being in the catering industry. Well, there are nearly 900,000 British Bangladeshis in the UK with British roots. And we do so many other things more than the catering industry. So we're much more. And all of the panelists here are not involved directly with the catering industry. We may be attached indirectly. But we are so much more as British Bangladeshi, and we contribute at every level, whether it's government, whether it's politics, whether it's industry, whether it's in business. We contribute at every level, and we should be proud. We have recently overtaken, I think Pakistan was mentioned as a community, as a reference community. Last year before last, we overtook the Pakistani community in educational achievement. In GCSEs, we achieved a far higher result, A to C, compared to the Pakistani community. So we're doing extremely well, but we mustn't be complacent. We've become integrated within the community, and my kids, one of the fears that I have, although we're going from strength to strength, is that we will become lazy as time goes by and become part of the community, the larger community, where ambition and drive goes out of our boiler. And we become like one of them, and we start to then reflect the achievements of the indigenous community. I just want to say a few words about my experience working in Bangladesh. I wanted my kids to experience what I had experienced growing up. I came to the UK when I was 8. I remember I was given a buddy to lunch because I couldn't speak any English, so they wanted to keep me from eating pork. And I remember my buddy saying I couldn't have the Scotch egg because that looked so tasty, but I couldn't have it. And I didn't know why he wouldn't allow me to have that. It was only later that I realized why. But I remember that journey from that point to now as being a very vivid one, because I remember the National Front being very strong. I agree 9/11 has been a game changer, but I think it's been a game changer for the good. because the Muslim community is much more well known. Islam as a religion is much more well known, and it's so similar to Christianity that we don't realize that Islam isn't a foreign religion. It's part and parcel of the Judeo-Christian tradition that exists within Europe. St. George, for example, was a Syrian. Yeah, he came from Syria, and he's the patron saint of many European countries, including England. We have the St. George's cross on our flag. So there's so much. But I wanted my kids, who were all born here, to have a little bit of heritage from Bangladesh. So in 2001, I decided to take everybody for 5 years and live in Bangladesh. But I didn't want them to miss out on the educational opportunities here. So what I did was I rented an apartment in Dhaka, in Baridara. I found a school, international school in Dhaka, which was British curriculum that they followed there. I put them in, and within 3 months, I was contacted by Fakhruddin Ahmed, who was the governor of Bangladesh Bank. And somebody had referred my name to him, saying that I was settled in Bangladesh, and he phoned me suddenly when I was in the UK and said, look, we are taking part in the central bank strengthening project. We know that you're very much a specialist in finance. Would you like to come and give us some of your skills in terms of strengthening our bank, which is Bangladesh Bank? And so what I wanted to do was 5 years to relax. I suddenly found myself taking up a World Bank post working at Bangladesh Bank, and Sanawar Choudhury was there. There were 17 British Bangladeshis at that time there, and it was brilliant because different people were working. These were all British Bangladeshis that had gone back to Bangladesh to give a little bit of what they knew, what skill set they had. So it was, I was basically at home working with these people, working at Bangladesh Bank. And the first thing I did, when they took out the manual which Bangladesh Bank operated, it has the State Bank of Pakistan. Now this was, what was it, 2001. This was 2002, so we'd become independent for many years. And we still had the State Bank of Pakistan, which manual we used in operating the policies and practices of Bangladesh Bank. So you could see that change had come very slowly to Bangladesh. So I did many things in Bangladesh, and my children thoroughly loved being there. My children spent time with leading individuals of Bangladesh, the businessmen. And in 2001, Bangladesh hadn't developed in the way that it is now. The business, the garments industry, the cycling industry, and various other things were just starting off. I remember driving the best car in Dhaka, but now that car was probably the worst car in Dhaka because they have now moved on many folds. So all I say to everyone is it's not important where we've come from, but where we intend to go. And if we can keep aware of our roots, if we can maintain our cultures, if we can respect not only our own religion, but religions of others as having equal rights in this world, a very small global world of ours, then I think we'll always go in the right direction. If we don't, then we will falter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanawar. That was truly fascinating, especially your stories, it's just completely agree with you on everything that you've said, and amazed by how many different things you've done. I'm going to open it out to question and answers in a few minutes, but first of all, I had a question for the panel members, and something that I'd quite like to know, which is, what would you say was the one factor that is the key to your success that perhaps we could take away today? And I'll start off with Tharik Hussain first, because I'm conscious that you haven't spoken for a while.
Abdal hasn't spoken long.
So
we'll give it to him.
Would you like to give it over to you?
Senior. He's itching, and he's older than me as well.
Just by the hair. Just the hair. You know, I don't know about success, but you know, I'm very proud. As I said, the room just got packed with, I hope, more British Bangladeshis. It's our community. I'm very proud. You know, a lot of my people I grew up with, we now live. I have this thing about. Do you know what a lauzal is? anyone, a lot of the British Bangladeshis who lived in Tower Hamlets have followed the sort of the tradition of the Jewish community, have sort of become well off and have sort of gone to the suburb, and now they live with their parents or their in-laws and so forth. They've got a nice garden, they can grow vegetables. What I said, I'm very proud and very passionate about Tower Hamlets. I love living in Tower Hamlets, not because I was a councillor and I was a councillor and involved in politics. It's because there's so much energy. And so I'm sort of, in a way, what Tharik's trying to do is to sort of change the mindset. That it's not, yes, it is a £4 billion industry, the curry, and we're very proud of that, but we're much more than that. And so a little bit of me trying to get the British Bangladeshi community to be recognised in the mainstream and singing the praise of some of my fellow British Bangladeshis doing amazing work. I think that gives me a little bit of satisfaction. So the people in this audience, people in this panel, your success gives me that satisfaction.
Would you like to?
So mine's going to be quite simple because I'm a teacher by profession as well, and it's flashing onto what many of the panel members have said here, because for me the overarching thing here is education, and it's education about not just where we come from, but also where we want to go as well, and it's education about the communities we live in, our own identities, who we are, and who we're around as well. So, being a teacher is quite an obvious statement, but education.
I guess I'm going to say two. I'm going to cheat a little bit, but I think confidence, and I think with that comes just trying different things out. I think I started volunteering when I was 14. I went to a homework club because I was terrible at maths. Turns out I was really good at English, so I became a tutor and a mentor there, and then I tried on hundreds of things after that. Internships in think tanks and businesses and so on. So I think the best bit of advice I would give is just build that confidence, nurture that as early on as possible.
Would you like to say anything more? No, I think it.
Oh, okay. That's actually quite a hard question, isn't it? I'd like to say lots of things, but I think the main thing would be education, but I would say the education I received, a state education I received in Tower Hamlets, good or bad, and it wasn't perfect, but even in its dysfunctional form, it was far more formative for me than university. By the time I got to university, I actually saw lots of things wrong, and I realised that actually growing up in a borough that's slightly dysfunctional, I'd have to say, being prepared to deal with the messiness of life, the messiness of parents, the messiness of language, all of that actually prepares you for a much more complicated future. But by the time you reach university, even though you know that everybody else is different from you, you should have that confidence to think, well, they're different, but actually they're told to be different and flourish, so actually me being different is already special enough. I don't really need to prove myself in the way that others do, and just be confident knowing that your diversity and your asset is good enough, and never be taught to think that because you don't pronounce your P's and Q's, or because you speak with an accent, that's not going to take you far in life. It will, frankly, and that's what I want young people to feel, that it's about what comes from within you, not what you sound like, not who you know, not how you speak, not your connection. Frankly, it's that energy and that spirit that actually every young person has, and somehow by the time you get to university, particularly for working class children, they lose it. And I think hold it, because that's what's going to make you special.
Believe it or not, I wanted to be an electrician when I was young. And I got one of the 6 apprenticeship with Eastern Electricity Board in Kings Lynn, Norfolk. I don't know whether you've heard of Kings Lynn. And after about 6 weeks worth of induction, I said to my dad on a rainy day, having come back home on a rainy day wearing yellow overalls, I said, this isn't for me. So it was my dad that said, you only had one life, do what you want to do. So I became an accountant and went from there.
That's great, thank you so much for that. I'd like to now open it out to questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yes? Yes, yeah.
I've only just arrived. I had a apologies mine, having to fly, and sadly this conference. But
It's okay, Paul can hear you if you say it.
my apologies for having arrived late. 2 minutes ago, but I'm very passionate about the great Rabindranath Tagore, and amongst many other things, he was, a great educator. And I wonder, here in Tower Hamlets, when I look at the wonder of his work, of which education was just one area, and I think Professor Amar Hussain is a very beautiful example of somebody who's been through the Tagore education system. Just a man who's sort of flourished in so many directions, out through the boundaries, universally respected.
So a lot of us here have walked past, probably walked past now, Abdal Park. A lot of us probably don't know this gentleman who was generally an average person back in 78, lost his life to racism. And that park, St. Mary's, is now renamed. I was at a play in Brady Centre, and there is a Rabindranath Tagore event. Sorry, guys, I'm promoting someone else's tomorrow evening at the Brady Centre, so I will invite you over to go there. To sort of reach out to the young British Bangladeshi. The mayor of Tower Hamlets actually says this wonderful thing about, he was at an event for Sheikh Mujib, the founder of Bangladesh. As he walked out, some kids were saying, "Hello, Mr. Biggs, hello, Mayor," and doing a selfie with him. He says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I've just come from Sheikh Mujib," and they're like, "Who's he?" So this is the state of some of the young British Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlet who know Snapchat. I know what that is. And all sorts of other stuff happening on Instagram. And there's something else I've learned. But they don't know their rich histories. And Tagore, Nazrul, the rebel poet. It's all very much quoting Karl Marx and Malcolm X, sorry, I should say. But then we should learn some of our own. So there is a process. And unfortunately, funding. This government, it's not a political thing, the right-wing government, is taking away a lot of the resource from community resource, and mother tongue schools and after-school clubs and so forth. I'm a product of Keen Student, where we went. So a lot of that is going away, but I think there is a revival in Tower Hamlet by the new people who come over, in the sense that there's sort of students who come over to revive that. So you see some of the more artistic stuff, not just the Poshaki Mela for hip-hop, but the actual richness of Bengal that's now being re-energated. And I hope Rich Mix, which is what it's all about, is going to be doing some of that. So tomorrow night, come to Brady Centre, and I'm sure you can learn more.
Thank you so much. Do you have any other questions? Someone in the middle, kids there later.
Hi, this has been a really fascinating day of talks, and I really enjoyed all the discussion about the various topics that have come up. And one of the things that especially Mr. Abdullah mentioned was inspiring the new generation. But if you look at the room around you, it's surprising that we have very few young people that have actually come to this event and events like this. Being a recent graduate myself and being somewhat involved with the Bangladeshi Society University, I've seen you posting on the different Facebook groups trying to...
I've learned how to use it, that's
that is something that, that's how I got to know about it as well. But unfortunately, you might have noticed that the response and the uptake rate hasn't been that great. So while it's really important to talk about why people are feeling kind of disengaged, and talk about these issues at the policy level, would you say about kind of making it cool to be Bangladeshi, but that kind of feeds into Snapchat and Instagram, like you said? When you look at how young people use Bangla like as a language and how they connect with their Bengali identities, they only do so in the context of their homes and their families, but like within friends, even within Bengali friends, it's not cool to be Bangladeshi. So I think all your well-intentioned efforts that come from getting Bangladeshis up there and being proud of their heritage, I think it sounds really unacademic, but you have to make being Bengali cool, and I think that is something that we need to put more focus on. And the focus has to be at the pop culture level rather than like a greater focus on the pop culture level rather than at the academic level.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Can I reinterpret your question? Are you asking what are you asking? How do we make it cooler to be Bengali?
Like, how do your efforts at these like individual levels and at the higher levels, how does it kind of really translate down to the pop culture level?
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to pass it first of all to, I'm going to pass it over to Halima Khanom, who I think is very cool, sitting here with a hijab, and she knows all about heritage and hijab and costume, and then I'll pass it over to Tharik. You want to say something?
Hi, thank you for your question. There is no easy way to do it. It's sort of what I've been trying to do for a few years now. I always say this joke to people, how you could break the popular culture narrative and how you can make people realize there's something called a country called Bangladesh and there's a Bengali population living in the UK. And I relate it to the film Titanic. And I say if Rose had fallen in love with a Bengali lascar instead of an American sailor, everyone would know. And that's all I can say. Oh, and maybe we should start a hashtag. That's the only other thing I can
I think
It's probably a good idea for the next film.
I think what you're touching upon is something, academic discussions across the country and across the globe have to try and deal with. How do you make these kinds of issues popular? How do you make them interesting? How do you make them fascinating? And if you're going to look at the Bengali question more specifically, then I think people like my example earlier of Nadia is a great example. This is how you make it interesting. My daughters, who I'm not going to embarrass by pointing out where they are, but they walked into the room, and when I told them about Nadia's journey, they were extremely excited, and they were like, they're both early teens, just like secondary school, and getting them interested into getting them interested in heritage is very, very challenging. And one of the ways I do it, obviously, is I take them on my travels and what have you, but not everyone's in a position to do that. So I think trying to weave it into interesting pop culture is probably one of the only ways that you're going to be able to popularise this amongst young people, as you say. Because let's be honest, on a sunny day like this, how many kids, or young people, sorry, are going to want to sit in a room with people at the front talking? I'm a teacher, I have to do it all the time. So I know how challenging that is when they have to legally be there, and I'm always scratching my brain to try and make that talk time less and that kind of engagement time more, and find new media ways to sort of engage them, put up a video, show them something that I've come across on social media. So it is a massive challenge, especially when you're dealing with complex topics like this: identity, narratives, history, heritage. The words alone scare these kids away. So you have to find, like you say, a way to make it cool. But I do think, the example of what Nadia is doing is probably one of the isolating examples we have where she's making that quite interesting.
There's also Ali Official.
Go on, you tell me.
Do you follow Ali Official? I think he's an interesting example of how this sort of culture has permeated sort of that crowd. I don't think he's still quite got it. I don't find some of his stuff funny. I think it's getting a bit old. But maybe we should have a talk with him about heritage.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm conscious that the whole day has been running late, so I think there's it's brilliant. There's loads of people all of a sudden, but I think they hear all the comedy. I'm going to take one or two more questions. What do you think? I'll take one more last question. Does anybody have one? I think, is there someone there? Yeah.
There's one person here.
Yeah, just referring back to the previous question from the sister that made it at the end. I think the dynamics, if we go back to our youth, has changed dramatically. And you're right, when you mentioned that we have a government that has taken away a lot of those, if you like, facilities that we had when we were younger. When we were younger, we had access to so much, in so far as because we fought for it. Probably not a lot of people around this room know this, but I actually witnessed the murder of Abdal who died in front of me. So we had something to engage with. We had that whole of those marches and demonstrations that it was ignited by the murder. We focused around that, so we had something there. What does engage young people nowadays? That's the important question. If it doesn't have a focus, then you're going to have very much difficulty to bring everything else in. The heritage that we want our kids to have, our grandchildren to have, I'm getting over now. That's not going to be quite as easy as it was when we were young. We were isolated, and we needed to make a point. We need to engage with the wider community, but we need to stand up for ourselves first. That is something that probably is missing now, in a sense. I mean, the narrative has moved on. It's not that Bengalis are poor, Bengalis are underachieving. That is not the question anymore. Most of our kids that we see around are well-achieving, going to university, good jobs. That's not the center of our focus. The focus is now the heritage that we're losing. In those generations, we will lose that unless we find, repetitively, if you like, things to engage with. And it comes sometimes from the bottom rather than the top. We can talk about policies, but we didn't have that. We didn't have political support. We didn't have our parents understanding necessarily what we were fighting for. So it came from the government. Sometimes I think the young people are the best source of inspiration. So perhaps they need to take that mantle on and say, okay, this is the next step, this is the next change, this is the next focus. Let's bring something into ourselves that we can hold on to, engage with, and show what we actually stand for, who we are. We are Bangladeshis, we are British, we are Muslims, or whatever we are. This is our identity, and it's got to come, it has to come from those that feel disenfranchised, if you like, the young people.
Thank you very much. I think I'd like to start to conclude this discussion now. I've thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. I've learnt a lot. We've learned that it looks like there are some problems, but that in this room alone, I don't know if my mic's working, can everybody hear me? In this room alone, there are hugely successful people, and that is good for the future. I'd also like to say a little something in terms of how I feel as Bangladeshi, which is that I think Bangladeshis are amazing. We have an awesome sense of humour, we have a good heart, we are very intelligent. Look at this panel here, look at the audience. And I think we have a lot very far to go. I'd like to thank Halima Begum today, thank you so much for your stories. I'd like to thank Sanawar Choudhury, thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed everything that you've said and your experiences. I'd like to thank Abdal Ullah again, and Halima Khanom, thank you so much. And finally to, so who are you again?
I'm Tharik.
Finally to Tharik. Thank you lastly to all of you for being so patient and listening to us.